Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The moment Felicity turned to me, the skillet in her hand gleaming under the kitchen light, I knew this was it, the final straw. I'd said no, just once, but that refusal hit her like a slap in the face. Her mouth twisted into a sneer, eyes narrowing, sizing me up as if I were an unruly child in need of correction. "You think you're too good for us, don't you?" she spat, advancing a step. Her voice was ice cold. "All that money's gone to your head." "Enough, Felicity," I said, my voice barely steady. "I've been giving you $6,000 a month. What more do you want?" She took another step forward, the skillet tightening in her grip. I glanced at Brandon, hoping he'd step in, say something, anything to break the tension thickening around us. But he just stood there, arms folded, watching as if this scene was beneath his concern. Felicity scoffed, her voice laced with contempt. "You think you can get by in this family without respect? You think a little extra money lets you disrespect your elders? This isn't about respect. It's about control," I retorted, feeling a surge of courage. "And I'm done letting you manipulate me." That did it. In one swift motion, she raised the skillet and brought it down, grazing my shoulder. Pain shot through me, and I staggered back, clutching my arm as I stared at her, shocked and breathless. I searched Brandon's face for any sign of remorse, any flicker of humanity. But he simply looked away, jaw tight, eyes cold. "Brandon," I gasped, desperate. "Are you really going to let her do this?" His expression didn't change. "Maybe you shouldn't provoke her," he muttered, shrugging. That simple dismissive line cut deeper than the blow itself. I felt a bitter, gut-wrenching clarity settle over me as I looked between them. There would be no apology, no intervention. This was who they were, and this was what I had been enabling by staying silent. I turned on my heel, heart pounding, and walked upstairs to grab my suitcase. I threw clothes into it, not caring about order, not stopping to think twice. In my mind, every item I packed became another decision. Another moment I was finally taking my life back. Felicity's voice echoed up the stairs, taunting, accusing, but I was done listening. As I headed for the door, Brandon caught up, his face hardening. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his tone commanding. "Away from here," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "I'm done with your mother, and I'm done with you. Maybe you should start learning to fend for yourselves." I slammed the door on his protests, my pulse pounding in my ears. I paced the small guest room at my parents' house, the walls closing in with the weight of everything I'd just left behind. The anger I'd carried from Felicity's assault and Brandon's cold indifference pulsed like a heartbeat, reminding me that I was still in survival mode. I hadn't fully let myself process the humiliation of it all, or the years of quiet suffering I'd endured. But I knew one thing. This time, I wasn't going back without securing something I could truly call my own. A knock at the door startled me, and my mom stepped in, her face lined with worry. "Are you all right, honey?" she asked, her voice gentle, cautious. "I will be, Mom," I replied, pausing to gather my thoughts. "But I need a plan. I can't let them keep everything. Not after everything I've given." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Well, what can you do?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to demand the house," I said firmly. "If Brandon wants me to even consider coming back, he'll have to sign it over to me. No excuses, no loopholes." My mom's eyebrows rose, and a glimmer of pride flickered in her eyes. "That's the spirit, Avery. Don't let them get away with this." The next morning, I dialed Brandon's number, feeling a mix of adrenaline and dread as the line rang. He picked up on the third ring, his voice tense and unwelcoming. "What do you want, Avery?" "I want the house," I said without preamble, my voice steady. "If you and Felicity sign it over to me, I'll consider coming back. If not, we're done. It's that simple." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear him exhale sharply. "You're joking, right? After everything we've given you, you think you can just make demands?" "Given me," I laughed, the bitterness seeping into my voice. "Brandon, I've funded every luxury in your lives, paid for every whim of your mother's. This is me taking back what I've earned." His voice dropped, seething. "You're making a big mistake, Avery. If that's true, then prove it by doing the right thing. Or is that too much to ask?" I challenged. Silence. Then he muttered, "Fine. I'll talk to her." When he hung up, I felt a surge of relief. It was far from a victory, but it was a start. Days later, I received the signed paperwork, the title transferred to my name. My pulse quickened as I held it in my hands. A document proving my independence from the weight of their control. It was a small piece of paper, but a monumental shift in power. And with that, I was ready for the next step in reclaiming my life. The minute I stepped back into the house with the signed deed in my bag, I could feel the change in the air. This was no longer just Brandon and Felicity's domain. It was mine. They'd agreed to my terms, but I could see in Brandon's eyes that his compliance was laced with resentment. As I closed the door behind me, Brandon was already waiting in the living room, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. "So, you got what you wanted," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Now what?" I steadied myself, refusing to let him rattle me. "Now I live here on my own terms. If you can't handle that, maybe it's time you left." His face twisted, caught between disbelief and fury. "You really think you can just take over and act like you're in control? You're just an ungrateful." "Stop." I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've sacrificed everything for this family. Everything. So don't you dare try to guilt me now." Just then, Felicity entered the room, her eyes narrowing as she looked between us. "What's going on here?" Brandon turned to her, the hostility in his face only intensifying. "Your little investment here thinks she can call the shots now. Guess signing over the house wasn't enough. She wants to run the place too." Felicity's gaze shifted to me, her lip curling. "You think owning this house changes anything, Avery? You still owe us for everything we've done for you." My pulse quickened, but I kept my tone calm. "Actually, I don't owe you anything. Legally, this house is mine now, and I suggest you both respect that unless you want to find out what I'm capable of." Brandon's expression hardened, and he took a step closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game." I met his glare, unflinching. "Maybe, but I'm not afraid of you anymore." The silence was thick, tense, each of us unwilling to back down. Brandon's eyes darkened, a flicker of something menacing behind them, but I held my ground. I'd come too far to let them intimidate me now. Finally, Felicity broke the silence with a sneer. "Fine, but don't think we're going to make this easy for you." I watched as they both left the room, the weight of their resentment hanging heavily in the air. But I felt a strange sense of satisfaction too. A feeling that, despite the danger, I was finally free. This was the start of my new life, and I wasn't about to let them ruin it. The next morning, as I walked into the kitchen, I found Felicity at the table, her eyes already set in a cold glare. The tension in the room was almost tangible, and I knew without a doubt that I'd entered hostile territory. "You're up early," I remarked casually, reaching for a cup. My fingers brushed the handle just as Felicity's voice sliced through the silence. "Let's get one thing clear, Avery," she spat. "Just because your name is on the deed doesn't mean you can walk around like you own the place. I built this home. I put my blood and sweat into it. You're nothing more than an intruder here." I tightened my grip on the cup, fighting the anger rising in my chest. "You signed it over to me, Felicity. It's my house now, and you're a guest. Maybe you should start acting like one." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a venomous glint. "Don't fool yourself. You think Brandon and I will just step aside because you forced us to sign a few papers." My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "It's not about forcing anyone. It's about taking what I deserve, and I'm not backing down." The sound of footsteps made me turn. Brandon entered, his face set in a grim expression as he glanced between us. "Enough," he growled, but his eyes stayed on me. "This arrangement isn't going to last, Avery. You'll be out of here soon enough." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a threat." Brandon's lips twisted into a cold smile. "Take it however you want. But remember, we're not going anywhere without a fight. If you want to keep this place, you better be ready for a war." For a moment, the three of us stood in silence, each sizing the others up, the lines between us clearly drawn. I knew now there was no going back. Whatever they had planned, I was ready. The first thing I did after leaving Brandon and Felicity behind was file for divorce. I walked into my lawyer's office with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. feeling the weight of every insult, every deceit, and every betrayal that had led me there. Sitting across from my attorney, I laid out the story as plainly as I could, sharing the mounting financial and emotional toll Brandon and Felicity had inflicted on me. The divorce process was grueling. Brandon's initial response was fury, thinly veiled behind a smug, dismissive attitude. He countered each request with a barrage of demands, dragging his feet at every opportunity, and Felicity, of course, was never far from the battle. But I stayed focused. With every form I signed and each court session attended, I felt a bit more control returning to my life. Finally, after months of tense negotiations, Brandon agreed to settle. The house would have gone to me permanently without complaint, and he would forfeit any remaining claims to my business income. That signature on the final paperwork felt like a hard-won victory. I was free, officially, but something still nagged at me. Something in Brandon's cold, calculating expression the last time I saw him. I knew him too well to trust this ending was truly the end. A few nights later, I received a letter from the bank addressed to both of us. Confused, I tore it open and found a legal notice about an account I had never opened. It was a joint account Brandon had set up in my name and had been draining steadily, pulling money from my business income under the guise of shared expenses. A chill ran through me. He had been setting me up for fraud. Had I stayed any longer or failed to win the settlement, this account could have destroyed me financially. Panicking, I called my attorney. Brandon's been draining money from an account he opened in my name, I said breathlessly. My attorney went silent for a moment. Avery, it looks like he staged this account to appear as if you were complicit. If the divorce hadn't gone your way, this could have been used as grounds for a lawsuit against you. The depth of Brandon's betrayal left me numb. All those nights he'd spent working in his office, he was laying a trap. That evening, a knock on my door broke my reverie. I looked through the peephole to find Felicity, her face twisted with a smirk. Hesitantly, I opened the door just a crack. "What do you want, Felicity?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She crossed her arms, looking smug. "Just wanted to see if you'd figured out our little surprise. Too bad it didn't pan out the way we planned, but I still get to watch you squirm." My blood ran cold. "So, you knew? You were in on all of this?" "Of course," she sneered. "You think you were anything more than a paycheck to us." I looked her straight in the eye, feeling a surge of clarity. "Then I hope you're ready for a surprise of your own," I said, my voice like steel. "I've already filed a fraud complaint with the police. They're investigating the account and tracking every transaction Brandon made." Her smirk disappeared, and her face blanched. She threw a quick, panicked glance over her shoulder, where Brandon sat waiting in the car, watching us intently. "Give him the message, Felicity," I said, shutting the door firmly. "The game is over." As I locked the door, I felt a powerful sense of peace settle over me. They had tried to strip away everything, but I had emerged stronger, reclaiming not just my home, but my freedom and my future. The next morning, the police called to confirm that the investigation was underway, with both Brandon and Felicity named in the case. I took a deep breath, letting the victory sink in.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.